because people who actually solve problems or fulfill desires, which is the consumer side of the same question, are successful, full stop, unless they're deeply unprofitable for what they've done. And so I tend to focus uniquely on that at the early stages. Sort of right behind that is the person who's carrying this message to me, the entrepreneur themselves. I hate it when it's just one of them. I really don't like sort of single players. I mean, sometimes it's so early that they're by themselves because they haven't gathered anybody else. It's fine, I understand. I prefer a small group because it's going to be a small group. And individuals by themselves tend to oscillate far more widely than people who are tempered by group dynamics, myself included. So it's in everyone's interest that you become a small group quickly. But when I look at the people, I'm looking at survivability traits, resilience, the ability to tell a story very well, the ability to sell in all directions, to vendors, to customers, to investors, to me. It's a skill in its own right. Great salespeople are very good at understanding what the other person wants to hear, determining that, and then delivering it to them. I look for that skill. So beyond the story, the customer and the entrepreneur, the rest of it's just stuff. Being unlikable, and there's a lot of them out there. What a lot of us forget, it's funny because it happens precisely the same amount on both sides of the equation. So when I'm the entrepreneur, I see it in VCs. When I'm the investor, I see it in the entrepreneurs. I see it wherever I'm not. Says something. Could be me. But we all tend to forget that the other guy knows something too. Right? Thus, as an entrepreneur, it amazes me when an investor who doesn't know an area will come back with critique of the opportunity based on their failure of knowing things rather than working from what they do know. Right? So if somebody comes to me and says, well, I have great concerns about this model because this is perfectly reasonable, we can go back through it. But if they say, well, let me tell you my experience in web-based software, and having had none, they should have the humility to know that their feedback is only going to be as a consumer, which is fine, but it's only as a consumer. So not knowing but feeling that because they have money they've now become an expert is a fatal mistake of hubris amongst investors. Conversely, when an entrepreneur stands in front of me and teaches me how businesses start, I think to myself, but I actually know how businesses start. And you're an idiot for being patronizing. But so many entrepreneurs are. I met one just the other day who was stunning in her ignorance of who she was talking to. Really quite remarkable accomplishment. So she was telling me how money gets raised and how you get funded and what they were going to do about it and how no one else understood. I know one thing, she won't be getting it from me. I think it comes down to a philosophical question upon which a lot of the government support rests. It's a question of being patronizing in the most traditional sense of the word, and being a patron, being a father figure to these nice, young, little, I always have this visual image of our father figure, Daddy Brown, sitting there patting us on our little head saying, you too can run a little business if you're successful. And you just take our hands and hold it tight, and we'll guard you from the evil out there, and we'll help you up. I mean, it's deeply patronizing. And if you look at the kind of support we get, it's the kind of support you deliver to children. So it's simplistic, uneducated, headline-grabbing activities that are frequently banal and inane and of no value. So when one of the various many regional organizations puts together yet another series of seminars to tell small businesses to be, innovative or to go global, and they bring in a couple talking heads, frequently myself, so I'm complicit with them, in standing there and saying, yes, here's how you become a global business. It's patronizing. It's bullshit. And it's a waste of the taxpayers' money. It's time spent on checking metrics instead of actually delivering answers to questions and solving problems. The challenges small business face, in large part, are challenges frequently created by government. So possibly much of the best support the government can give is to undo many of the things it imposes and thus get out of the way. Thus, when a small business, when a business of 2 or 3 people is required to meet the same standards across any set of regulations as a business of 20 people or 200 or 2,000, the impact on the business of 3 people is going to be, by each step, 1 order of magnitude greater than the businesses that are 1 more order of magnitude or more larger than it. It is a precise inverse relationship, and there's no getting around it. Therefore, with the best of interest, Minister 7, in a list of ministers who've released their newest opportunity to guard the unguarded, to protect the unprotected, to save everyone, has yet again stabbed another knife in the back of small startups that have now yet more to do to deliver social goals that none of us can afford because they're killing the businesses that create the wealth. In there is something ironic. The fact of the matter is, this current government generally views business as a necessary evil, to be cultivated just long enough until it can be exploited so that the money can be put into government coffers to be distributed by those who know better. I disagree with the philosophical premise, and I think therefore that the question of support should be an obligation on government to justify each new activity prior to business being asked to answer to it. Thus, if a new regulation is going to come in, can they prove, just as we do environmental impact, and it's becoming more and more de rigueur to ask for the impact on the environment, so too we should do economic impact of yet more burdensome regulation. Because just as we try to preserve the environment, and in fact improve the environment, so too we need to preserve and restore our economic infrastructure. And they are deeply analogous. Therefore, the deleterious impact of the well-meaning, naive, and usually misguided activities should be measured, and they should have an impact assessment. And if they can't pass it, they shouldn't be allowed to do it. That would be my view. I mean, if I had to pick one out who I'm always stupefied by what he's accomplished. You know, Elon Musk, the fellow who started PayPal. He's running his own spacecraft company. He was one of the founders and drivers behind Tesla Electric Motors. The guy takes on big stuff. He's just really impressive. Well, probably the second company I started, Visual Software. I mean, we started it, we launched it, we were going to reinvent 3D graphics for film and TV. We did. Had a huge contribution in that area, in that time. Had a huge amount of fun. Made a lot of people rich.